Talking with the experts.
Hello and welcome to Talking with the Experts. My name's Rose Davidson from rosedavidson.com, and Talking with the Experts is about all things business by business owners for business owners, and you can find it on all good podcasting streaming platforms and on YouTube. And I would love you to subscribe to the YouTube channel. That would be wonderful. Show it a bit of love. Anyway, my guest today is Tara Solberg, and Tara has a business called Few and Far, and we're going to be discussing building a business from the ground up with zero experience and growing into a multi-million-dollar brand that is trusted and beloved both locally and across the globe. And a little bit about Tara. She was born creative as an entrepreneur. So yeah, she's really got the spirit. And she is the founder and owner of both Few and Far and Indigo Love, two halves of one thriving business based on the beautiful south coast of New South Wales in Australia. Tara has built a multi-layered business comprising retail, wholesale and online offerings of one-off treasures and thoughtful homewares for which the brand is known. Welcome, Tara. Wow, that sounds like a lovely business.
Oh, thank you. Thanks, Rose. Thanks so much for having me.
So tell me a little bit how you started with nothing and you've grown into this huge, almost corporation, I guess.
Okay, so we opened our first store in 2009, so around 12 years ago. My husband and I started the business together, but we were originally graphic designers in the surf industry. So we worked for a company called Ocean and Earth, and I was the ladies' designer and Danny was the men's designer. And part of that job involved traveling the world twice a year to forecast trends and to buy samples and different, look out for different, colors, fabrics, all of the different options for building a range. And we would basically leave with an empty suitcase and come home with a full one. So that experience really taught us a lot, and it was on one of those experiences that we visited it was actually a large showroom, furniture and homewares showroom, which was kind of like a little side trip because we were there to look at fashion. But I'd always loved homeware, so I dragged Danny into this shop. When we were in that shop, the owner was sitting at a desk up at the back of this warehouse, and he looked so relaxed and he just looked like he loved what he did. And Danny looked at him and he thought, I want to be him. And I'd always wanted to start a homewares and furniture business, but we'd kind of thought that it may have just been a hobby. Like, how could you make money out of something like that? It was kind of one of those things that I would always go into on the weekends, but I wouldn't really spend any money. I'd just browse and have a look around and enjoy the experience of it, I guess. But so we came home from that trip really inspired to start a business of our own. And it was at a time in the current positions that we were working in, we were sort of both feeling a little bit like we had more and we needed to explore that. So I ended up resigning and finishing up, and Danny stayed working there with the plan to obviously join me if we knew that the business was to be successful. But I found a store that we leased and we did a complete makeover. And my father's a builder, so he was able to help us with that, luckily.
Oh, there you go. Dads are good for lots of things, aren't they?
Oh, yeah. We had no money. The bank wouldn't lend us any money. We had done a business plan for the bank, obviously, but which was actually a really great exercise because it made us really think the whole process through and plan everything out. And part of that plan was that we wanted to open a second store within 5 years. But so we had this business plan, couldn't get any money. Danny had a boat that he had, so he sold that. And then for the remainder of the funds that we needed, because obviously owning a store, there's a lot of money and investment required, firstly for the fit out and then to buy all of the stock just to get you started. So for the remainder, my mum and dad lent me the money, the bank of mum and dad.
Yes.
But we were able to repay them back the next year. So that was, always the agreement. And yeah, so from there we got started. I visited some trade fairs, ordered in the new products and started getting everything unpacked and set up. We'd spend all of our time at the store in the afternoons and at night after work. And then we got to opening day and it was a huge success, which was really lucky, but we'd worked really hard to get to that position.
Yeah, it sounds like an awesome adventure.
Yeah.
So tell me, how does one go about if they can't get funding from the bank and you don't have a bank of mum and dad? If they wanted to travel down the same road as you did, how would they go about doing that?
It's actually a really difficult process. Like that's probably one of the hardest parts, I guess, just to get started and finding the funds to do that. So obviously you have to think about how big you want to start out and what you can physically actually do. At that time, because I'm actually about 10 years younger than Danny, and we'd only sort of been together for about 3 years at that stage. So we didn't really have a lot either between us. Like a lot of the times you can, if you've already got a house or, different properties, you can borrow against the equity and all of that sort of thing, but we didn't really have anything. So that's basically where we had to just sell whatever it was that we had that, had to come second and do it that way. So, and obviously we had a credit card and things like that, but I would never recommend, getting 1 million credit cards to fund it. It was all very strategic and very planned. But otherwise, I think if you can't get that access from the bank of mum and dad or wherever it might be, maybe you just have to scale back and start a bit smaller.
Yeah, it's good advice, actually. I know a lot of people have gone all in and borrowed money here, there and everywhere and then ended up going broke and they still owed all these families and friends money, and that doesn't make for good relationships, does it?
Exactly. And that's where I think having that business plan and everything is really important, because if you do need to borrow it from somebody, you're showing them that you actually have a plan and something that you're working towards. It's not just like an idea that you've pulled out and there's no thought process behind it.
Yeah, I think a business plan's a very good idea before you even go into laying any money out.
Definitely. Yeah.
I think a lot of people that go into a business think, well, I'll just leave my job, I'll take my skills with me, I'll open a business that uses the skills that I learned for the last 20 or 30 years.
Yeah.
And off you go, especially if it's a bricks and mortar business. An online business probably isn't so difficult because you can work from home, but bricks and mortar business would be quite difficult to set up, especially in this day and age now with everything so uncertain.
Definitely. Well, we did, and when we did launch this idea, we'd done a lot of research before we kind of made these big decisions as well. So I'd done a lot of research in terms of how we would actually implement it, and then we also had a friend, which was a huge factor in kind of cementing our decision. So we had a friend who had a homewares and furniture store, and she was based in Milton, which was a little bit further south of us. And she was actually selling her business at the time, but she'd already had a buyer for it, because I got Danny to ring her up and ask her, hey, ask her, can we buy her business? And so he rang her just to speak to her about it. But she said, the sale's already going through, so it's too late. But she said, but you don't need to buy a business. You guys are creative. You've got that background knowledge in terms of branding and design and that side of things. She's like, you could easily do this and I would be more than happy to help you out. So we had that generosity of her help. And, without that, it would have been extremely difficult, and even more difficult to have made that leap, because she showed us through her books, of how much the business had actually made and that sort of thing. And that gave us the confidence to go, hey, this is a real business. We can actually make this work. But without that, I think the leap would have been a lot harder, and the amount of investment would have been really scary.
So I guess a question is, what type of stock do you have? It's homewares, but what types of homewares and other crafty things have you got in there?
Yeah, so we specialize in one-of-a-kind pieces. So we import a lot from India and China, but most of those pieces are antiques or reclaimed pieces. So in India, for example, they'll buy an entire haveli that's, falling down, and then they'll go in there and they'll salvage as much as they can from that building. And it might be like an old window frame or a door frame that they'll cut down and they'll turn into a console or a sideboard or a mirror frame or something like that. So we have a lot of one-of-a-kind pieces, and we love that side of them because they all come with a story and a point of conversation, and they really add character and soul to an interior. But mixed with that, we do love mixing the old and the new. So we also have a stock range of items, lighting, kitchen items, dining ware, everything, basically everything that you have in your home, we stock.
Oh, wow. Absolutely brilliant. So I guess tell me why you've got two sides of your business. So you've got Few and Far, and you've got Indigo Love. What's the difference?
Yeah, so we started with the idea of having the retail store, which was Few and Far. And based on that idea of always wanting one-of-a-kind pieces, or the name Few and Far is based on the few and far between. So we literally wanted that as our experience in store. So having pieces that were few and far between. So based on that idea, we wanted to travel and we wanted to source these unique pieces. So when I said that we had a 5-year plan, and we ended up making that happen the very next year. So we opened a second store in Huskisson, which we then called Indigo Love. And that had clothing and different pieces in there, but we imported our first container of Chinese furniture for that one, just sort of thinking, well, we're going to have to fill this store with furniture. If we can make this happen, it's going to be much more affordable for us to buy a whole container rather than 10 or so pieces or however many it was that we needed, and then not have any backup stock. So Danny went overseas to on this Chinese trip, which is a whole nother story. But but we ended up bringing back this container, and then the next year we bought a little cottage and moved into there, and then we did our first Indian container. And when we were in that store, people came in who had other retail stores wondering and asking us, where did you get these products? Like, I've never seen anything like them before. I'd really like to know, where you got them. And we said, well, we actually imported them. And then they'd offered to buy them from us under a wholesale agreement. So we thought, well, why not? Like, this will allow us to work with higher quantities and that sort of thing. So that was how the wholesale side was born, which is now Indigo Love. We have one little store, like an outlet in Huskisson called Indigo Love, but in general, the wholesale side of the business is Indigo Love, and that's where we wholesale to almost 1,000 accounts Australia-wide and some internationally as well.
Wow, that's incredible for starting from absolutely nothing to being so huge. It's well done. Congratulations.
Thank you. It's been a lot of work, but
yes, I'm sure it has been. It's not being in business for yourself is not just 9 to 5. It's impossible to be 9 to 5.
Yes.
I guess a question that comes around with married couples, especially working together in the same business, how do you handle the conflicts and keep the work stuff at work and the home stuff at home?
Yeah, good question. Especially because we've got 2 young children as well. So we've got a 4-year-old and a 7-year-old. But I think we're pretty good at it. Danny and I have always, well, I guess coming into this business together, we actually worked together previously. So we knew that we could work together. And we both focus on different areas of the business. So Danny's more involved in the wholesale and the logistics side, operations, all of that kind of thing. And I'm more retail-based, merchandising, marketing, the creative sort of side. But then we do come together with product development and, all of that behind the scenes work that goes on. So I think we do pretty well. We manage to kind of keep it quite separate. And yeah, we do have a few disagreements, but they're never really kind of big ones. And it's usually because Danny's chosen something weird overseas. And I'm like, that's never going to sell. What are you thinking?
I bet it does.
Yeah, eventually.
Oh, well, that's the male taste for you, I suppose. You probably thought it looked pretty flash.
Let him have his way there for a little bit.
Yeah, you got to give them a bit of leeway now and again.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I know my husband and we owned a fish and chip shop on the Gold Coast for 10 years.
Yeah.
And we used to be in each other's pockets pretty much 24/7.
Yeah.
And he used to do the shop and I'd do the paperwork. However, I was still in the shop most days. And so it was quite difficult to leave home and business separate because, you'd bring home to work and you take work home.
Yeah. And it's probably one of the things that we'll discuss, when you're lying awake at night or you've just gone to bed and you've got to, because you've had that whole bedtime routine, putting the kids to bed and there's dinner and it's all of that sort of thing. So you never really get that opportunity to discuss things. But so I'm not going to lie, it does kind of come into it then. But no, I think we've got a really good relationship in terms of working together and yeah, we're both really passionate about what we do as well. So we just really enjoy it.
Oh, excellent. Well, that's good for you because a lot of marriages fall apart. Even though people still actually work together, they end up getting divorced. It's weird.
Yeah. It's stressful, that's for sure.
So how important was, branding and websites and all that in the very beginning?
Really, really important. And that's where I think we had an advantage because we were both obviously trained in that area or that field. So I'd done a Bachelor of Design at university and Danny, he had a Bachelor of Graphic Design. And he'd also worked overseas in London with some really amazing corporations over there. So we both had really good knowledge of branding. And I know that when we were thinking about starting a business, it's kind of the thing that we started with, like straight away, it's almost like, designing the logo and how does that look? And then how does that tie in with this? And then the overall theme and the vision of the store. So branding is, I would say, your number one. You have to have strong branding to have a successful business.
Yeah, a lot of people say, don't bother with the logo, don't bother with the website, don't bother with the business card, just get your name out there, especially for, solopreneurs. But yeah, I always thought too, when I started my business before the podcast, that, all those other things were important. If you didn't have a logo, people had no way of remembering you, I thought.
Exactly.
That's my thinking anyway.
Yeah, and you have to build trust with your customers as well. And if you've got that, your logo and your website and everything looks professional, they're going to trust you a lot more.
I think so too. Yeah, I mean, I build my own website, so I'm happy with mine because they're pretty and they're me. They reflect who I am. So they're all colourful and no white pages, and they're all coloured backgrounds.
Yeah, well, that's part of your branding. So,
I love it.
Personal branding as well.
Yeah. All right. So, any books written about your journey?
Oh, not yet. I'd like to. That's sort of my next project that I'd like to start. But I've actually just finished. I've just launched an online course. It's called Trade Wins. And it's a course for anyone wanting to start a retail business. So basically, I've documented everything that I've learned in the last 12 years and I've put it together, and the hard lessons and the positive lessons, everything's in there. And so my goal is to guide those people through that whole business journey so that they don't have to learn the hard way, I guess you'd say, and avoid all of those expensive mistakes that you can, commit when starting a business. And it's something that I really wish I'd had access to before we started our business. It would have just made things a lot easier. So yeah, hopefully that course will help a lot of others to start their business. But it's also because I really love obviously what I do, and I want to be able to share that with other people so that if they've got a dream or a passion like I did, then they can follow through with that, but be guided in the right direction.
Yeah, so where can they find this course, Tara?
So I've got my website, which is www.tarasolberg.com, and the course is called Trade Wins.
Lovely. All right. Well, I'll send our viewers and listeners in that direction. I'm sure that they'll be very interested, especially if they want to start their own business.
Yes.
I guess what's the next steps for you and your businesses?
We are always full of ideas, and we never say no to an opportunity. So obviously with COVID thrown in there, everything's quite uncertain at the moment, but being in the homewares and furniture industry, it has been pretty chaotic for us and really quite busy with everyone at home, and especially being located in the regional areas that we are. So without international travel, people are able to come down and enjoy some time on the South Coast or the Highlands, wherever that may be. But we would really love to continue expanding. So we've got the 4 stores at the moment in Huskisson, Berry and Bowral, the 2 in Huskisson, but we would like to look into more other, continue to expand into regional areas and potentially have a flagship store in one of the cities somewhere. So yeah, it's definitely on our list of things to look out for.
Oh, perfect. Sounds great. What a great plan. Any wise words as we finish up today, Tara?
I would say to always trust your instinct. Obviously, you need to be planned and calculated and, have all of your ducks in a row, I guess. But it's one of the things that Danny and I have really run our business from, and that's instinct and trusting our instinct. And a lot of the times, when you don't listen to it, it was for a reason that you should have. So I'm a big believer in trusting your gut and your instinct.
Yeah, a lot of people say, trust your intuition. And women seem to be better at that than men for some reason. I'm not quite sure why, but...
Yeah. Look inside.
Yeah, that's it. I guess so. Well, Tara, thank you so much for joining me today. Where else can people find you other than at the Tara.Solberg?
Tarasolberg.com. Yeah, so we've got the Few and Far website, which is fewandfar.com.au. We're on Instagram, Few and Far Homes, or there's our Indigo Love, so it's indigolove.com.au. And I'm also on Instagram under Tara Solberg.
All right, well, I'll have to go and check you out.
Thanks so much, Rose, and thank you so much for having me.
It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you for joining me.
No problem.
Talking with the experts.